The massive chamber stretched out like a metal canyon, its walls covered in strange symbols that glowed with soft blue light. Ji-Woo Kim stood at the center of it all, wearing his best diplomatic uniform and trying not to show how nervous he felt. Around him sat creatures he had only seen in classified reports until today. The Vorthak delegation looked like giant squids made of living water, their tentacles moving in patterns that their translators said meant they were discussing something important. The Helian representatives appeared to be walking crystals, their bodies catching and reflecting the chamber's light in rainbow patterns. The Breks looked the most frightening to human eyes, with their insect-like bodies and clicking mandibles that never stopped moving. Ji-Woo had been a naval commander for 15 years before becoming Earth's first ambassador to the stars. He had faced pirates in the asteroid belt and led rescue missions in the worst storms Jupiter could throw at ships. But nothing had prepared him for this moment, standing before beings who had traveled between stars when humans were still learning to make fire. The Vorthak speaker, whose name sounded like water flowing over rocks, raised one tentacle for attention. The primitive species from the third planet will now state their purpose in this sacred chamber. Ji-Woo took a deep breath. Back on Earth, billions of people were watching this moment through quantum communication feeds. He represented not just his government, but every human who had ever looked up at the stars and wondered what was out there. "Honored beings," Ji-Woo began, his voice carrying clearly through the translation systems. "We come in peace, seeking knowledge and friendship with all species who share this galaxy. Earth offers our unique perspectives and skills in exchange for the wisdom you have gathered across the stars." A sound like breaking glass came from the Helian delegation. The translator rendered it as laughter, though not the kind humans would find pleasant. The Breks clicked their mandibles faster, which Ji-Woo had learned meant they were either excited or angry. "Unique perspectives," repeated the Helian speaker, its voice like wind chimes in a storm. "What could a species that has barely left its birth system offer to civilizations that have ruled space for millions of years?" Ji-Woo felt heat rise in his cheeks, but kept his expression calm. Perhaps the very fact that we see things differently could be valuable. Fresh eyes often spot solutions that experience might overlook. This time the Breks delegation made the sound, a harsh buzzing that the translator called contemptuous amusement. Their speaker stood on 4 legs, while the other 2 held what looked like data tablets. "The young species thinks it has wisdom to offer its elders. How charming." The 3 alien powers had been in contact with each other for thousands of years. They had fought wars, made peace, and established the rules that governed this part of the galaxy. To them, humanity was just another primitive race to be cataloged and managed. "We have reviewed your species' development," the Vorthak speaker continued. "You have shown typical progress for a young civilization. Tool use, agriculture, industrial development, basic space travel, nothing remarkable." Ji-Woo noticed something in the way they spoke. These beings had seen countless species follow the same path. They had turned first contact into a routine procedure, complete with forms to fill out and boxes to check. Humanity was just another entry in their database. "However," the Helian speaker added, its crystalline body pulsing with orange light, "your species shows concerning tendencies. Your history reveals excessive aggression, territorial expansion, and resistance to authority. These traits require management." The word management made Ji-Woo's stomach tighten. "What kind of management are you suggesting?" "Standard containment protocols," the Breks speaker buzzed. "Your species will remain within your birth system until you achieve proper social development. We estimate this will require approximately 2,000 of your years. 2,000 years? Jiwoo could not hide his shock. You're talking about imprisoning our entire species in our own solar system? Not imprisonment, the Vorthak corrected, with what might have been patience. Protection. Young species often destroy themselves when they gain access to advanced technology too quickly. We are saving you from yourselves. Jiwoo thought about Captain Daeho Park, waiting in orbit aboard the UES Harmony with his crew. They had traveled further from Earth than any humans in history, using engines that pushed the limits of human engineering. The idea of being forced back into their own system, of having their exploration stopped by alien decree, went against everything that made them human. And if we refuse this protection? Jiwoo asked. The chamber fell silent. The three alien delegations exchanged glances that somehow managed to cross species barriers. Finally, the Helian speaker answered. Refusal is not an option. The safety of the galaxy requires that dangerous species be contained until they mature. This decision is final. Jiwoo activated his communication implant, sending a coded message to Captain Park. Just 3 words. Protocol 7. Execute. I understand your position, Jiwoo said aloud, but I think you misunderstand ours. Humans don't respond well to being caged. The Vorthak speaker's tentacles moved in what the translator called an dismissive gesture. Your preferences are irrelevant. The blockade fleet is already in position around your system. Any attempt to leave will be met with appropriate force. What you call appropriate force, we might call an act of war, Jiwoo said quietly. This brought more of that glass-breaking laughter from the Helians. War? Your entire species has perhaps 50 ships capable of interplanetary travel. The blockade fleet contains 300 vessels, each more advanced than anything in your primitive arsenal. This is not war, human. This is a parent stopping a child from touching fire. High above the chamber, invisible to the alien sensors that monitored. Everything within the station, the UES Harmony, hung in space like a waiting predator. Captain Park had received Jiwoo's message and was already putting plans into motion that the galaxy's elder races could never have imagined. Park had grown up in the slums of Seoul, where survival meant being smarter and tougher than everyone, trying to take what little you had. The military had given him structure and purpose, but the streets had taught him the most important lesson of all. Never fight fair when survival is on the line. Sunmi, what's the status on their scanning arrays? Park asked his science officer. Sunmi Lee looked up from her console, her fingers still dancing over holographic controls. Their sensors are incredibly advanced, Captain, but they're designed to detect known technology. They're not looking for what we're actually doing. The alien races had been spacefaring for so long that they had forgotten what it was like to be desperate. They had rules for everything, procedures that had been refined over thousands of years. They knew exactly how space combat worked, what weapons were effective, and how a proper civilization should behave. They had never encountered humans. Park smiled as reports came in from across his ship. In the engineering section, teams were modifying mining charges into something that would have made the arms control treaties back on Earth very nervous. In the navigation department, officers were plotting courses that ignored every rule of safe space travel. In the communications section, operators were preparing to broadcast on frequencies that should have been impossible to use. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Ji-hoon Nam from the tactical station, "the alien blockade is maintaining standard formation patterns. They're treating this like a routine patrol operation." "Of course they are," Park replied. "They've done this 1,000 times before. They know exactly what to expect from a primitive species trying to break out of containment. The UES Harmony was not a warship in any traditional sense. It had been built for exploration and diplomacy, with only basic defensive weapons and shields designed to protect against asteroids and cosmic radiation. Against 300 alien warships, it should have been completely outmatched, but the aliens were thinking like civilized beings who followed rules. Park was thinking like a human who had grown up fighting for scraps in the ruins of a city that had been bombed back to the Stone Age and rebuilt through pure stubbornness. "Sunmi, are you ready with the modifications?" Park asked. "Ready, Captain. Though I should point out that what we're about to do violates approximately 47 different space treaties." "Good thing we never signed those treaties," Park replied. "Jihoon, begin the approach. Nice and slow, like we're surrendering." The UES Harmony began moving toward the blockade fleet, broadcasting surrender signals on all standard frequencies. To the alien commanders, it looked exactly like what they expected. A primitive species accepting the inevitable. They were completely unprepared for what happened next. Park had spent months studying every piece of intelligence Earth had gathered about alien technology and tactics. The one thing that stood out was how predictable they had become. They fought wars like chess games with established rules and expected moves. Humans had never learned to fight like that. Humans fought like cornered animals with access to advanced technology and a complete willingness to ignore any rule that got in their way. The first phase of what would later be called the Harmony Incident began when Park's ship reached optimal range of the blockade fleet. Instead of surrendering, the human vessel suddenly accelerated to a speed that should have torn it apart, while simultaneously broadcasting a signal that overloaded every sensor array within 50 kilometers. In the confusion that followed, 3 Vorthak cruisers found themselves disabled by what their computers classified as primitive kinetic weapons, but which were actually mining charges that had been fired from cargo launchers and guided by navigation. Computers that treated Newton's laws more like suggestions than absolute rules. By the time the alien fleet realized what was happening, the UES Harmony was already gone, leaving behind 3 damaged ships and a galaxy that would never again underestimate the species from the 3rd planet of an unremarkable star. 8 years had passed since the Harmony incident, and the galaxy had mostly forgotten about the strange humans who had embarrassed the Vorthak blockade fleet. The 3 major powers had filed their reports, updated their databases, and moved on to more important matters. After all, one lucky escape by a primitive species hardly warranted continued attention. They had no idea how wrong they were. Admiral Minho Choi stood in the command center of Firebase Alpha, hidden deep inside an asteroid in the Kepler 442 system. Through the reinforced windows, he could see the construction yards where human ships were being built far from Earth's watchful sky. Ships that used designs no alien computer would recognize, powered by engines that broke every rule of proper engineering. Status report, Minho said to his aide, a young officer named Yuna Song, who had started as a biologist, but now served as his intelligence chief. 17 systems established, Admiral, Yuna reported, her fingers moving across a holographic display. 43 observation posts, 12 research stations, and 6 shipyards. All hidden, all operational. Minho nodded with satisfaction. The strategy was working perfectly. While the aliens watched Earth's official activities through their long-range sensors, humanity had quietly spread across dozens of star systems using ships too small to trigger their detection grids and bases too well hidden to show up on casual scans. It was a strategy born from Earth's own history, when smaller forces had repeatedly defeated larger ones through patience, preparation, and the willingness to fight dirty. The aliens might have superior technology, but they had forgotten how to think like hunters. Any contact from the alien. Powers? Minho asked. Nothing direct, Yuna replied, though our listening posts have detected increased Brex activity in the outer sectors. They're looking for something, but they don't seem to know what. Minho allowed himself a small smile. The Brex swarm was the most aggressive of the three major powers, with a military doctrine based on overwhelming force and rapid expansion. They had conquered hundreds of worlds through simple brutality, crushing resistance before it could organize. They were also the most likely to make the mistake Minho was waiting for. On the other side of the galaxy, Lieutenant Commander Ji-hoon. Nam was making final preparations for what Earth Command had designated Operation Quiet Thunder. His team of 30 specialists had spent 2 years infiltrating Brex territory, studying their tactics, their technology, and most importantly, their weaknesses. The Brex thought like insects because they were insects. Their society was organized around hive mentality, with clear hierarchies and established patterns of behavior. It made them efficient and predictable, but it also made them vulnerable to tactics they couldn't understand. Remember, Ji-hoon told his team as they prepared to deploy, we're not trying to beat them in a fair fight, we're trying to make them beat themselves. The plan was simple in concept but complex in execution. The Brex had established a forward base in the Trappist system, using it to launch scouting missions into human space. Instead of attacking the base directly, Ji-hoon's team would manipulate their environment to turn their own instincts against them. Meanwhile, in a secret laboratory beneath the surface of Firebase Alpha, Dr. Yuna Song was conducting research that would have horrified the galaxy's ethics committees. She was studying captured alien technology not to copy it, but to understand how it could be turned into a weapon against its creators. The Brex neural networks are incredibly sophisticated, she explained to Admiral Minho during one of his inspection visits. But sophistication creates complexity, and complexity creates vulnerabilities. Yuna had discovered that Brex communication systems relied on quantum entanglement networks that connected every member of their species. It allowed for perfect coordination across vast distances, but it also meant that the right kind of signal could disrupt their entire command structure. How right? Minho asked. Give me 6 months and a proper testing environment, Yuna replied, and I can make their own communication system tear their fleet apart from the inside. The testing environment came sooner than expected. The Brex had finally noticed the strange energy signatures coming from the Kepler 442 system. To them, it looked like a small human research station had been established in violation of the containment protocols. The response was typical for their species. Overwhelming force applied without hesitation. Fleet Admiral Kethvar led 200 Brex warships toward what they expected to be an easy target. Intelligence reports suggested the human presence consisted of perhaps 50 individuals operating basic research equipment. The plan was to destroy the station completely, leaving no survivors to carry word back to Earth. They had no idea they were flying into the most carefully prepared trap in galactic history. Commander Su-Yung Han watched the Brex fleet approach. On her tactical display, feeling a mixture of excitement and terror that she had learned to associate with being human in a hostile galaxy. Her research station, designated New Sol, was the bait in Admiral Minho's trap, but it was also home to 300 people who had volunteered to be the first line of defense for humanity's expansion. They're maintaining standard attack formation, reported her tactical officer. 200 ships in a classic Brex battle wedge, moving at .7 light speed. Su-young nodded. Everything was proceeding exactly as the simulations had predicted. The Brex were following their established doctrine, which meant they were walking into a killing ground that had been 2 years in the making. "Signal all stations," she ordered. "Begin Phase 1. The Kepler 4I-42 system erupted into chaos. The Brex fleet suddenly found itself flying through a cloud of what their sensors identified as metallic debris. It should have been harmless, just the remnants of some ancient stellar collision. But as their ships passed through it, the debris began to behave in ways that violated every law of physics the Brex understood. Each piece of debris was actually a microscopic human drone, powered by technology that had been developed in the slums of Earth where people learned to make weapons from garbage. As the Brex ships moved through the cloud, millions of these tiny machines attached themselves to hull plating and began to work. Within minutes, the communication arrays on half the Brex fleet were sending random signals instead of coordinated commands. Navigation systems started receiving false data that made ships think they were somewhere else entirely. Weapon systems began targeting their own vessels instead of the human station. "What is happening?" Fleet Admiral Kethvar demanded as his command ship shuddered under what felt like enemy fire, but which his sensors insisted was coming from his own escort vessels. His communications officer, a young Brex named Zithak, frantically worked his controls. "Sir, we're receiving conflicting signals from all units. The quantum network is showing massive interference patterns." But the interference wasn't random. Dr. Yuna Song had spent months studying Brex neural networks, learning how their hive mind processed information. The signals being broadcast by the human drones were carefully designed to trigger specific responses in the Brex command structure. To the individual Brex commanders, it felt like they were receiving urgent orders from their superiors. Orders to attack specific targets, to change course immediately, to activate emergency protocols. The orders contradicted each other, but Brex psychology made it impossible for them to ignore commands from higher-ranked individuals. The result was exactly what Su-young had hoped for. 200 Brex warships began attacking each other with the same ruthless efficiency they had planned to use against New Seoul. "Phase 2, Su-young ordered. Hidden throughout the asteroid field, human weapon platforms that had been disguised as natural rock formations began to power up. But these weren't traditional weapons designed to punch through alien armor or overwhelm enemy shields. Instead, they fired precisely targeted electromagnetic pulses that interacted with the microscopic drones already attached to the Brex ships. The combination created feedback loops in the alien vessel's own power systems, causing them to overload and shut down. One by one, the Brex warships went dark. Fleet Admiral Kethvar found himself commanding a fleet that was destroying itself. Ships that had served the swarm for decades were firing on their own allies. Vessels that had never failed in battle were shutting down for no apparent reason. And through it all, the Human Research Station continued to broadcast on all frequencies. "This is Commander Su-young Han of the Earth Defense Force," the transmission said. "You are attacking a peaceful research station in violation of interstellar law. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." "Impossible!" Kethvar buzzed, his mandibles clicking with rage and confusion. "We outnumber them 200 to 1. How are they doing this?" His science officer, Pektar, looked up from her displays with what humans would have recognized as terror. "Sir, I don't think they're using weapons at all. I think they're using our own systems against us." The battle, if it could be called that, lasted 6 hours. When it was over, 197 Brex warships were floating powerless in space, their crews alive, but their vessels completely disabled. 3 ships had been destroyed when their overloaded systems exploded, but even those had been given time to evacuate their crews. The 3 remaining functional Brex vessels fled back toward their home territory, carrying news that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization. Commander Su-Yung Han stood in her command center, looking out at a field of dead alien warships. Her station had suffered no damage. Her people had not fired a single traditional weapon. They had won the largest space battle in recent galactic history without killing more than a dozen enemy personnel. "Signal Admiral Minho," she ordered. "Tell him the field test was successful." The message that reached the Brex homeworld 3 days later was simple but terrifying. A human research station crewed by 300 individuals had destroyed a fleet of 200 warships without taking casualties. The survivors spoke of weapons that turned their own technology against them, of humans who seemed to predict their every move, of a species that fought with a cold precision that bordered on supernatural. For the first time in their species history, the Brex swarm felt something they had never experienced before: fear of another species' military capabilities. They had no idea this was just the beginning. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been called within hours of receiving the Brex fleet's report from Kepler 442. For the first time in 3 centuries, all 3 major powers had agreed to meet without the usual months of diplomatic preparation. The chamber that had once seemed so impressive to human eyes now buzzed with urgent, frightened conversation. Counselor Tae-Woo Ryu walked into the great hall with steady steps, though inside he felt the weight of representing his entire species at this crucial moment. Unlike Ji-Woo Kim 8 years ago, Tae-Woo did not come as a supplicant, hoping for acceptance. He came as the representative of a power that had just humiliated one of the galaxy's greatest military forces. Behind him walked Captain Nayeon Hwang, commander of the UES Indomitable, humanity's most advanced warship. She wore her dress uniform with the quiet confidence of someone who had seen combat and survived. Her presence was not accidental. Earth wanted the aliens to know that humanity now spoke with military backing, the Vorthak representative now showing signs of age that had not been visible during first contact, raised a tentacle for attention. The human delegation will explain the unprovoked attack on Brex vessels in the Kepler system. Tae-Woo took his position at the center of the chamber, the same spot where Ji-Woo had stood years before. But the dynamic had completely changed. Where once the aliens had looked down at humanity with condescending patience, now they watched with barely concealed fear and anger. "Honored beings," Tae-Woo began, his voice carrying easily through the translation systems. "The attack you mention was actually a defensive action against an invasion fleet of 200 Brex warships that threatened a peaceful human research station." The Brex speaker, a different individual than the one from first contact, clicked, his mandibles aggressively. "That research station was established in violation of containment protocols. The human species was ordered to remain within their birth system." "We never agreed to those protocols," Tae-Woo replied calmly. "Earth has the same right to explore and establish research stations as any other species in this galaxy." A sound like breaking crystal came from the Helian delegation. "Rights? You speak of rights while your species demonstrates technology that violates the fundamental laws of civilized warfare?" Captain Nayeon stepped forward slightly, a movement that did not go unnoticed by the alien security forces positioned around the chamber. "With respect, We used no technology that your own scientists couldn't understand if they studied it properly. We simply used your technology in ways you hadn't considered. This was the heart of the matter, and everyone in the chamber knew it. The Brex fleet had not been destroyed by superior alien weapons or mysterious super science. It had been defeated by humans who understood their enemies better than their enemies understood themselves. The Vorthak speaker's tentacles moved in what the translators rendered as deep concern. The survival records from the incident describe impossible tactical coordination. Your vessels moved as if they knew our battle plans in advance. Tae-woo exchanged a quick glance with Captain Neon. They had expected this question and had prepared their answer carefully. We studied your tactical manuals. All three of your species have made your military doctrines available through your educational databases. We learned how you fight, and we planned accordingly. The silence that followed was profound. The three alien powers had spent thousands of years refining their military strategies, documenting their tactics, and teaching them to their officers. It had never occurred to them that an enemy might actually read and understand their own teachings well enough to turn them into weaknesses. Engineer Kyung-jae-im, who had accompanied the diplomatic mission as a technical advisor, spoke for the first time. Your species fight wars like you're playing games with fixed rules. You expect your enemies to follow the same patterns you do. Humans don't work that way. The Helian representative's crystalline body pulsed with orange light, indicating extreme agitation. You speak of warfare as if it were chaos. Civilized species fight according to established principles that minimize destruction and preserve resources. Civilized species, Captain Neon repeated, her voice carrying a hint of steel. And what happens when those civilized species encounter one that doesn't share their principles? Before anyone could answer, the chamber's alarm system activated. Red lights flashed as an urgent message appeared on the main display. A Helian patrol fleet had discovered another human installation, this one in the Gliese 667 system. Unlike the research station at Kepler 442, this appeared to be a military base. The Helian Collective's military commander, a being whose name translated roughly as Bright Sword of Justice, materialized as a hologram in the center of the chamber. His crystalline form sparkled with aggressive light patterns. "Esteemed Council," Bright Sword reported, "we have located what appears to be a major human military installation in clear violation of containment protocols. The base is heavily fortified and shows signs of advanced weapons research. I request permission to neutralize this threat immediately." Tae-woo felt his heart rate increase, but kept his expression neutral. The Gliese base was one of humanity's most important research facilities, where scientists, led by Dr. Yuna Song, were developing the next generation of defensive systems. If the Helians attacked it, the consequences could be catastrophic for both sides. "That base is conducting purely defensive research," Tae-woo said quickly. "It poses no threat to any species that doesn't attack it first." "Defensive research," the Brex speaker buzzed with what sounded like disbelief. "Like the defensive research that destroyed our fleet?" The tension in the chamber was building toward a breaking point. The three alien powers were clearly considering some kind of coordinated military response, while the human delegation was trying to prevent a war that could devastate the galaxy. It was Captain Neon who broke the deadlock with a statement that shocked everyone present. "If you attack that base," she said quietly, "you'll discover why we've been so careful to fight defensively until now." The Helian military commander's hologram flickered with angry light. "Are you threatening us, human?" "I'm warning you," Neon replied. "There's a difference. When humans fight defensively, we hold back. When we fight to protect something important to us, we don't. Bright Sword of Justice laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a hurricane. Your species has perhaps 50 warships capable of interstellar combat. The Helian Grand Armada consists of 1,000 dreadnoughts, each powered by the energy of a star. This is not a contest. Taewoo made one last attempt at diplomacy. Honored beings, there's no need for this conflict to escalate. Humanity seeks only to explore and learn. We have no territorial ambitions beyond establishing research stations and observation posts. Research stations that can destroy fleets, the Vorthak speaker pointed out. Observation posts that appear in our territory without permission. Your species has demonstrated that it cannot be trusted to expand peacefully. The Breck speaker clicked, his mandibles in agreement. The containment protocols exist for the safety of all galactic civilization. If they cannot be enforced through diplomacy, they will be enforced through military action. Engineer Kyungjae looked at the assembled alien representatives with something that might have been pity. You're making the same mistake everyone makes when they first encounter humans. You're assuming that because we're newer to space travel, we must be inferior in every way. Are you not? The Helion representative asked. In some ways, yes, Kyungjae admitted. Our ships are slower than yours, our weapons are less powerful, our shields are weaker, but we have one advantage that you've never learned to counter. Which is, we're willing to lose. The statement hung in the air like a challenge. The alien representatives looked at each other with growing confusion. In their experience, species that were willing to accept losses were species that got wiped out quickly. It was not a survival trait, but Captain Neon understood what Kyungjae meant, and she decided to make it clear to the aliens. Every human ship that goes into battle knows it might not come home. Every human base knows it might be destroyed. We plan for those losses. We prepare for them. And we make sure that even if we lose, the enemy pays a price they can't afford. Impossible, Bright Sword declared. No species can sustain a military doctrine based on acceptable losses. It leads to extinction. Does it? Neon asked. Or does it lead to victory against enemies who can't imagine fighting that way? The holographic commander seemed to pulse with frustrated energy. We shall see. The Grand Armada will depart for the Gliesa system immediately. Your defensive research facility will be eliminated, and your species will learn to respect the authority of their betters. As the hologram faded, Taewoo made one final attempt at preventing catastrophe. Please reconsider. There are alternatives to warfare. The time for alternatives has passed, the Vorthak speaker replied. Your species has shown that it cannot be trusted to follow galactic law. The Helian response is proportionate and necessary. Captain Neon activated her communication implant, sending a coded message to Fleet Admiral Hyunwoo Kang aboard the UES Defiance, currently hidden in the outer reaches of the Wolf 359 system. The message was simple. Expect company. Show them. Why we call it the Defiance. As the human delegation prepared to leave the council chamber, Taewoo turned back to address the alien representatives one final time. You have 1,000 ships, he said quietly. We have 47. By your calculations, this should be a massacre. It will be, the Breck speaker replied confidently. Yes, Taewoo agreed. But I don't think you understand who's going to be massacred. The human delegation left the chamber in silence, while behind them the three great powers of the galaxy began planning what they believed would be the final solution to the human problem. They had no idea they were about to learn why humanity had spent so much time studying their tactics, their technology, and their weaknesses. They were about to discover what happened when a species that had learned to fight in the ruins of bombed cities was given access to starships and the motivation to protect their own. The Battle of Wolf 359 would be remembered as the moment the galaxy learned to fear humanity. But first, the aliens had to make the mistake of treating it like just another military operation against a primitive species. That mistake would cost them everything. The news of Wolf 359 spread across the galaxy like wildfire. 1,000 Helian dreadnoughts, each one powered by stellar energy and armed with weapons that could crack planets, had been systematically dismantled by 47 human ships. Not destroyed in a glorious battle, but taken apart piece by piece like machines being disassembled by skilled engineers. Fleet Admiral Yunwoo Kang stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, looking out at the field of disabled Helian vessels floating in space around Wolf 359. His tactical display showed the final count: 993 enemy ships disabled, their crews evacuated, their weapons safely removed. 7 ships had been completely destroyed when their crews refused evacuation orders, choosing death over the shame of surrender. "Admiral," reported his communications officer, "we're receiving surrender transmissions from the remaining Helian forces. They're requesting safe passage back to their territory." Kang nodded slowly. The battle had lasted 18 hours, but it had felt like a lifetime. Every moment had been planned, every move calculated years in advance. The humans had known this confrontation was coming since the day they first left Earth's solar system. "Grant their request," Kang ordered, "and make sure they understand the message we're sending." The message was simple. Humanity could have annihilated the entire Helian Grand Armada, but chose mercy instead. It was a demonstration of power that went beyond mere military capability. It showed that humans possessed something the galaxy had never seen before: the ability to choose restraint even in total victory. But not everyone in the galaxy understood the message the way Kang intended. In the deepest chambers of the Vorthak Empire's capital world, emergency sessions were being held in pools of liquid that glowed with bioluminescent urgency. The Vorthak were the oldest spacefaring civilization in the galaxy, having ruled the stars when the other powers were still discovering fire. They had seen species rise and fall, witnessed the birth and death of entire civilizations. They had never seen anything like humanity. Empress Flowing Wisdom, whose age was measured in millennia rather than years, extended her tentacles toward the holographic display showing the aftermath of Wolf 359. Her advisors floated around her in the sacred pools, their own tentacles moving in patterns of deep concern. "Explain to me again how this happened," she commanded, her voice carrying the authority of eons. War leader Crushing Depths, the most experienced military commander in Vorthak space, pulsed with colors that indicated profound confusion. "Your Empress, by all calculations, it should have been impossible. The humans used no superweapons, no unknown technology. They simply coordinated their forces in ways our computers cannot model." "Show me the battle recordings again." The holographic display shifted, showing the human fleet's approach to Wolf 359. To experienced military observers, it looked like suicide. 47 small ships advancing against a force more than 20 times their size, with no apparent strategy beyond hoping for the best. But then the human formation began to change. Instead of the standard battle lines that every civilized species used, the human ships spread out in 3 dimensions, moving in patterns that seemed random, but which created overlapping fields of fire that covered every possible approach. When the Helian fleet moved to engage, they found themselves fighting not one coordinated enemy, but dozens of independent units that somehow worked together like parts of a single mind. "Look at this movement," Crushing Depths indicated a section of the recording. "The humans sacrificed 3 ships to create a gap in the Helian formation, but watch what happens next. The gap that cost 3 human vessels allowed the remaining ships to pour through the Helian formation like water through a broken dam. Within minutes, the massive alien fleet found itself surrounded, with human ships attacking from every direction, using tactics that turned the Helians' own size against them. They treat space like terrain," observed Deep Current Analysis, the Vorthak's chief strategic advisor. "Most species fight in space as if it were an ocean, with fleets moving in formation across a flat surface. The humans fight as if space were a mountain range, using 3-dimensional positioning to create advantages that shouldn't exist." Empress Flowing Wisdom absorbed this information with the patience of ages, but her response carried the urgency of immediate threat. "If the humans can defeat the Helian Grand Armada with less than 50 ships, what could they do with 100? 1,000? The question hung in the water like a toxic cloud. The Vorthak Empire controlled 1,200 star systems and commanded fleets that numbered in the tens of thousands. But if human military effectiveness scaled with their numbers, no force in the galaxy could stand against them. "There is only one solution," the Empress declared. "The 3 powers must unite against this threat." The idea was unthinkable. The Vorthak, Hellion, and Brex civilizations had been rivals for thousands of years. They had fought wars that lasted centuries, built barriers that spanned star systems, and developed weapons specifically designed to counter each other's strengths. The notion of alliance between them violated every principle of galactic politics. But the humans had done more than win a battle. They had demonstrated that the old rules no longer applied. On the Brex homeworld, Queen Mother Zithara listened to reports from her scouts with growing alarm. The insectoid ruler had lived through 17 major wars and had seen her people conquer hundreds of worlds through superior numbers and relentless aggression. But the human tactics described by her intelligence officers defied everything she understood about warfare. "They fight like us," reported Scout Leader Kethvak, his mandibles clicking with nervous energy. "But also not like us. They coordinate like a hive mind, but each unit acts independently. They sacrifice individuals for the greater good, but they also adapt instantly to changing conditions." The Brex had always assumed that their hive mentality gave them an unbeatable advantage in large-scale warfare. Individual Brex soldiers might not be as creative as other species, but they could coordinate actions across thousands of units with perfect precision. It was a strategy that had crushed every enemy they had ever faced. But the humans seemed to combine hive-like coordination with individual creativity in ways that should have been impossible. They moved like a swarm when it served their purposes, but could break apart into independent units when the situation demanded it. "How many humans are there?" Queen Mother Zithara asked. "Intelligence estimates place their total population at approximately 12 billion, replied information gatherer Pekthar. But less than 1% of that population appears to be involved in military activities. The Queen Mother's chittering laughter filled the chamber. 1% of 12 billion is still 120 million. If they can train even a fraction of that number to fight like the crews at Wolf 359... The implication was clear. Humanity might be numerically smaller than the galaxy's major powers, but their military effectiveness per individual was unlike anything in recorded history. If they chose to mobilize their full population for war, They could field forces that would dwarf anything the established civilizations could produce. General Jinsu O stood in the command center deep beneath the surface of Luna, studying intelligence reports that painted a picture of galactic panic. Every major power was mobilizing their fleets, recalling ships from distant territories, and forming alliances that would have been impossible just months before. "They're scared," observed Dr. Minji Yoon, the director of humanity's most classified research project. Wolf 359 showed them that we're not just another primitive species. Now they're preparing for total war. Jinsu nodded grimly. He had expected this response, had planned for it, but seeing it unfold still filled him with a mixture of pride and sorrow. Humanity had wanted nothing more than to explore the galaxy and learn from the species they encountered. Instead, they had been forced to demonstrate that they were the most dangerous military force in known space. "How long before they're ready to move against Earth?" he asked. "Intelligence suggests 6 months for full mobilization," Minji replied. "They're not just gathering ships. They're integrating their technologies, sharing tactical information, and coordinating strategies. This won't be like the piecemeal attacks we faced before." Admiral Dongyuk Seo, commander of the Sol Defense Fleet, looked up from his planning displays. "How many ships are we looking at?" "Conservative estimates suggest 10,000 vessels," Minji said quietly. "Possibly more if they can convince the smaller powers to join the alliance." The number was staggering. Earth's entire space fleet consisted of fewer than 800 ships, most of them designed for exploration and research rather than combat. Against 10,000 alien warships, even human tactical superiority might not be enough. But Jinsu had been preparing for this moment since the day humanity first encountered the galactic powers. Deep beneath the lunar surface, in facilities that didn't appear on any official records, the most ambitious military project in human history was nearing completion. "Status on Prometheus?" he asked. Minji's expression was carefully neutral, but her eyes held a gleam that spoke of scientific breakthroughs that bordered on the miraculous. "We'll be ready, General. When they come for Earth, they'll discover why we've been so careful to fight defensively until now." Across the galaxy, the 3 great powers were putting aside millennia of rivalry to face what they saw as an existential threat. The Vorthak contributed their mastery of biological warfare and their understanding of long-term strategy. The Helion Collective provided their stellar engineering and energy manipulation technologies. The Breck Swarm offered their overwhelming numbers and their willingness to accept massive casualties in pursuit of victory. Together, they represented the combined military might of civilizations that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. Their alliance fleet would be the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. But as they prepared for what they believed would be the final battle against humanity, none of them understood the fundamental mistake they were making. They were thinking like conquerors planning to crush a rebellion. Humanity was thinking like survivors preparing to defend their home. The difference would determine the fate of every intelligent species in the galaxy. The Battle of Sol had lasted 3 days and changed everything. What remained of the combined Alliance fleet limped back to their home worlds, carrying news that would reshape galactic civilization forever. 10,000 ships had entered the Sol system with the goal of ending humanity's expansion. Less than 200 had survived to tell the story. President Sajin Bayek stood at the observation deck of the newly constructed orbital station above Earth, watching repair crews work on damaged human vessels. The cost of victory had been heavy for humanity as well. 93 ships lost, over 15,000 casualties, and damage to Luna's surface that would take decades to repair. But they had won, and more importantly, they had survived. The final reports are coming in, announced Fleet Admiral Che-Young-an as she joined the president at the massive viewing window. Intelligence confirms that all three major powers have accepted our terms for ceasefire. The terms had been simple: complete withdrawal from human space, recognition of Earth's right to expand freely, and acceptance of humanity as the dominant military power in the galaxy. The alternative had been clearly demonstrated during the battle when human forces had systematically dismantled the largest military fleet in galactic history without using weapons that violated any known laws of physics. Any word from the minor powers? Sejin asked. Most have already sent diplomatic messages expressing their desire for peaceful relations, Che-Young replied. They saw what happened to the Alliance fleet. Nobody wants to test whether our mercy extends to species that attack us after the HFY demonstration we just provided. The demonstration had been horrifying in its precision. When the combined Alliance fleet arrived at Sol, they expected to face Earth's known forces in traditional space combat. Instead, they discovered that humans had turned their entire solar system into a weapon. Every asteroid had been equipped with engines and targeting systems. The moons of Jupiter and Saturn had been converted into massive gun platforms. Even Earth's own moon had revealed hidden weapon batteries that emerged from beneath its surface like mechanical flowers blooming in the darkness of space. But the real shock had come when the alien fleet realized that Earth's defenses weren't trying to destroy them. They were trying to capture them. Commander Yoonji Lim had led the Sol Defense Fleet with tactics that turned the solar system itself into a trap. As enemy ships advanced toward Earth, they found themselves herded by precisely placed obstacles, channeled into killing zones where human ships waited with weapons designed not to penetrate armor but to disable systems. The prisoners are being processed according to the Geneva Conventions, Che-Young continued, though we've had to explain to them what prisoners of war are. Apparently, most galactic civilizations don't take captives. This had been another shock for the alien forces. When their ships were disabled and their crews faced death in the vacuum of space, human vessels had moved in to rescue them. Enemy personnel who expected execution or enslavement found themselves in clean facilities with medical care and regular meals, while diplomats worked out the details of their return home. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. A military victory so complete that the winners could afford to show mercy to everyone they had defeated. But not everyone had learned the lesson that Sul was meant to teach. 6 months after the battle, reports began coming in from the Outer Rim territories. The Kreth Dominion, a mid-level power that had remained neutral during the Alliance War, had decided that humanity's expansion needed to be tested on a smaller scale. Their target was the human colony of New Busan, established in the Kepler 438 system. The colonists were mostly scientists and their families, with only a small security force for protection against pirates and natural disasters. To the Kreth military, it looked like an easy target that would let them gauge human capabilities without triggering the kind of massive response that had destroyed the Alliance fleet. They were wrong about everything. Captain Bora Shin received the distress call from New Busan while her ship, the UES Swift Justice, was conducting routine patrols in the outer territories. The message was brief but clear. 30 Kreth warships had attacked the colony without warning, demanding immediate surrender. Time to intercept? Bora asked her navigation officer. 4 hours at maximum acceleration, came the reply. But Captain, we're just one ship against 30. Bora allowed herself a cold smile. Signal Fleet Command. Tell them we have a Kreth problem that needs the full rapid response protocol. The Rapid Response Fleet was humanity's answer to the new galactic reality. Small, fast ships positioned throughout human space, ready to converge on any threat within hours rather than days. Each ship was crewed by volunteers who had signed up specifically to protect human civilians from alien aggression. By the time Bora's ship reached the Kepler 438 system, she was no longer alone. 17 other human vessels had answered the call, appearing from hidden bases and patrol routes across a dozen star systems. Together, they represented less than 1% of Earth's total military strength. But they were enough. The Kreth had expected to face desperate colonists armed with mining equipment and civilian spacecraft. Instead, they found themselves surrounded by professional military vessels crewed by people who had studied every detail of the Sol system battle. Commander Kethvar of the Kreth Third Fleet watched his tactical display with growing horror as human ships materialized around his formation, like ghosts becoming solid. His intelligence reports had suggested that the nearest human military forces were weeks away from this system. "How many ships?" he demanded. 18 confirmed contacts, his sensor operator replied. "But, sir, they're moving in formations we've never seen before. It's like they're fighting as a single organism." Kethvar had read the reports from Sol, but reading about human tactics and experiencing them firsthand were completely different things. The human ships moved with a coordination that seemed impossible, each vessel perfectly positioned to support the others while creating overlapping fields of fire that covered every possible escape route. "Open a channel to the human commander," Kethvar ordered. Captain Bora appeared on his communication screen, her expression calm, but her eyes holding a coldness that made the alien commander instinctively step back from his display. "This is Captain Shin of the Earth Defense Force," she said without preamble. "You have attacked a human civilian colony without provocation. You have exactly 10 minutes to withdraw from this system, or you will be treated as hostile combatants." "Captain," Kethvar replied, trying to project confidence he didn't feel. "You are outnumbered nearly 2-to-1. Surely we can reach some accommodation." 9 minutes and 30 seconds, Bora said, and cut the transmission. What happened next became known as the Kepler demonstration. The Kreth fleet, convinced that their numerical advantage would carry the day, opened fire on the human vessels with weapons designed to crack planetary surfaces. The human response was swift, precise, and utterly devastating. Instead of trading shots in a traditional space battle, the human ships moved in three-dimensional patterns that turned the Kreth formation inside out. Within 20 minutes, all 30 alien vessels were disabled, their crews evacuated, and their weapon systems permanently destroyed. But unlike previous human victories, this one came with a different kind of message. President Sajin Bayek's response to the Kreth attack was broadcast throughout the galaxy on all frequencies. Standing in the rebuilt council chambers on Earth, with representatives from every major civilization watching, she delivered a statement that would define humanity's role in galactic affairs for generations to come. "The Kreth Dominion has learned what others have discovered," she said, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Attacking human civilians is not a test of our military capabilities. It is the removal of all restraints on our response." The aftermath of the Kepler demonstration was swift and comprehensive. Within 6 months, the Kreth Dominion no longer existed as an independent civilization. Their government was replaced by a human-supervised administration. Their military was disbanded and their weapons technology confiscated. Their economy was restructured to focus on peaceful development rather than military expansion. Most importantly, their population was left unharmed and free to continue their lives under the new system. The galaxy learned that when humans conquered, they didn't destroy civilizations. They transformed them. Ambassador Woo-sung Kim stood before the reformed Galactic Council, now housed in a new facility orbiting Earth's moon. The chamber was larger than the old one, designed to accommodate representatives from over 300 civilizations rather than just the three major powers that had once ruled the galaxy. The age of conquest is over, Woo-sung announced to the assembled delegates. Humanity offers protection to all species that seek peaceful development. We offer partnership to those who wish to explore the galaxy alongside us, and we offer a simple choice to those who still believe that military aggression is the path to prosperity. The choice was already clear to everyone present. Every civilization in the galaxy had seen what happened to species that attacked human interests. Some, like the former Alliance powers, had submitted peacefully and found themselves better off under human protection than they had been under their old systems. Others, like the Kreth, had resisted and discovered that resistance was not just futile, but counterproductive. "Questions?" Woo-sung asked the assembly. A representative from the Nalar Confederation, a small power from the Galactic Rim, raised a tentacle for attention. What assurance do we have that humanity will not simply become another empire ruling through force and fear? Woo-sung smiled. You have the same assurance every other species has had since we first entered galactic affairs. We could have destroyed you all years ago if that had been our goal. Instead, we offer you the choice to join us in building something better than what came before. It was a simple answer, but it carried the weight of demonstrated truth. Humanity had proven time and again that they possessed the power to destroy any civilization that opposed them. The fact that they chose not to exercise that power spoke louder than any diplomatic guarantee. As the session ended and representatives from across the galaxy filed out of the chamber, one truth was clear to everyone present. The age of human dominance was not a temporary phenomenon. It was the new reality of galactic civilization. And, for those wise enough to accept it, that reality offered opportunities that the old system had never provided. 8 years of peace had made the galaxy forget what war really meant. Trade flowed freely between star systems, scientific knowledge was shared openly, and conflicts were resolved through negotiation rather than violence. The human-led galactic government had created an era of prosperity that no previous civilization had achieved. But peace, as humanity had learned throughout their history, was always temporary. The first sign of trouble came from deep space monitoring stations positioned at the very edge of the galaxy. Sensors detected massive energy signatures moving through the void between galaxies, approaching from the direction of Andromeda. The signals were unlike anything in the databases of any known civilization. Marshal Young-Ho Go stood in the situation, room beneath Earth's surface, studying the latest intelligence reports with growing concern. As supreme military commander of all human forces, he had spent the peaceful years preparing for threats that might never come. Now it seemed his preparations would be tested. "How many ships?" he asked Dr. Soyeon Jang, who had become humanity's leading expert on unknown technologies since taking over the research programs after the Sol battle. "We can't be certain," Soyeon replied, her fingers moving across holographic displays that showed sensor readings from the outer rim. The energy signatures suggest at least 500 vessels, but they're using some kind of shielding technology that makes accurate counting impossible. Admiral Jae-hyun Ko, commander of humanity's deepest space fleets, looked up from his tactical analysis. The approach vector puts them on course for the Andromeda Gateway, the main jump point between our galaxy and theirs. If they're planning an invasion, that's where they'll have to come through. The Andromeda Gateway was a natural phenomenon, a gravitational anomaly that allowed faster-than-light travel between galaxies. It had been discovered by human explorers only 3 years earlier, but no expedition had yet been mounted to investigate what lay on the other side. Now, apparently, the other side was coming to them. "What do we know about their technology?" Young-Ho asked. Soyun's expression was grim. "Based on the energy readings, they have access to power sources that dwarf anything we've seen before. Their ships appear to be powered by controlled singularities, black holes that have been somehow tamed and used as engines. The weapons' signatures suggest they can destroy entire star systems." The room fell silent. Humanity had faced overwhelming odds before, but never against an enemy that possessed genuinely superior technology. Every previous victory had been achieved by using human tactics and ingenuity to overcome alien advantages. But what could tactics accomplish against weapons that could destroy suns? "There's something else," Soyun continued. "We've been analyzing the quantum signatures of their approach, and we found something disturbing. These energy patterns match theoretical predictions for precursor technology. The precursors were a legendary civilization that had ruled the galaxy millions of years ago, before disappearing for reasons unknown. They had left behind artifacts that modern science could barely understand, let alone duplicate. The idea that someone had not only found precursor technology but learned to use it was terrifying. "Who are they?" Young-Ho asked. "The few long-range communications we've intercepted identify them as the Zarathi Remnant," Soyun replied. "According to the transmissions, they're the survivors of a civilization that was destroyed by the precursors in the ancient past. They've spent millions of years in exile in the void between galaxies, studying precursor ruins and learning to use their technology." Admiral Jae-hyun processed this information with the cold calculation of a career military officer. "So they have millions of years of experience with technology that's beyond our understanding, weapons that can destroy star systems, and a grudge against anyone who rules the galaxy they consider theirs." "That's a fair summary," Soyun agreed. Young-Ho stood in silence for a moment, considering options that all seemed impossible. The combined human fleet numbered less than 3,000 ships, even including vessels from allied civilizations. Against 500 ships armed with precursor technology, those numbers meant nothing. But humanity had not become the galaxy's dominant power by accepting impossible odds as final answers. "How long before they reach the gateway?" he asked. 6 weeks, Jae-hyun replied. "Maybe 7 if they maintain their current approach speed." "Then we have 6 weeks to solve an impossible problem," Young-Ho said. "Soyun, I want every scientist we have working on precursor technology. Find me something, anything that gives us an edge. Jae-hyun, begin mobilizing the fleet. Every ship we can get to the gateway, human and allied." "Sir," Jae-hyun said carefully, "even if we mobilize everything, we'll be facing enemies with technology that's millions of years more advanced than ours. How do we fight that?" Young-Ho smiled, but it was not a pleasant expression. "The same way we always have. We find a way to make their advantages work against them." The Zarathi Remnant had indeed spent millions of years perfecting their use of precursor technology. Their ships were powered by controlled black holes, armed with weapons that manipulated gravity itself, and protected by shields that existed partially outside normal space-time. They had defeated countless civilizations during their exile, perfecting their art of total destruction. They had never encountered humans, Fleet Commander Seo Jong-chai stood on the bridge of the UES Indomitable Will, flagship of the largest human fleet ever assembled. Around her, holographic displays showed the positions of nearly 4,000 ships from dozens of different species, all united under human command for what everyone knew might be the final battle for galactic civilization. The Zarathi fleet had emerged from the Andromeda Gateway 3 hours ago, and their intentions were clear. They had broadcast a single message to all inhabited systems: submit to the restoration of the ancient order, or be cleansed from the galaxy entirely. "Status report," Seo-jong ordered. "All ships report ready for combat," replied her tactical officer. "The Zarathi are maintaining position at the gateway, apparently waiting for our response to their ultimatum." Seo-jong nodded. Intelligence suggested that the Zarathi expected either immediate surrender or a conventional space battle. They had fought hundreds of similar engagements during their long exile, always following the same pattern: demonstrate overwhelming technological superiority, then systematically destroy all opposition. But this time, they were fighting humans. "Signal, all ships," Seo-jong commanded. "Execute Operation Stellar Forge." What happened next had been planned and prepared for over the past 6 weeks, as human engineers and scientists worked around the clock to implement the most ambitious military operation in galactic history. It required not just ships and weapons, but the precise coordination of stellar engineering on a scale that no civilization had ever attempted. The Zarathi fleet suddenly found itself not facing an enemy armada, but something that their computers could not classify or understand. The human ships had not formed battle lines or defensive formations. Instead, they had positioned themselves around a nearby star system in patterns that seemed random, but which served a very specific purpose. As the Zarathi watched in confusion, the humans began moving the stars themselves. Using gravity manipulation technology that pushed the limits of their engineering capabilities, human forces began altering the orbital mechanics of the entire Proxima Centauri system. Planets shifted from their established paths, asteroids were redirected into new trajectories, and the star itself began showing signs of controlled instability. "What are they doing?" demanded Warlord Zethmak of the Zarathi command ship. His science officer, a being whose name translated roughly as Seeker of Forgotten Truths, studied the readings with growing alarm. "They appear to be weaponizing the stellar system itself, but this is impossible. Even precursor technology cannot control the fundamental forces of stellar mechanics on this scale." But the humans were not using precursor technology. They were using something far more dangerous: human ingenuity applied to a problem that required sacrificing everything for victory. The Zarathi had expected to face an enemy fleet in conventional space combat. Instead, they discovered that humans had redefined what constituted a battlefield. As their ships moved forward to engage what appeared to be scattered human forces, they found themselves flying into a trap that used the laws of physics themselves as weapons. The climax came when the Zarathi realized that the humans had not been trying to fight them at all. They had been herding them into position for something that no civilization in galactic history had ever attempted: the controlled detonation of a star. As Proxima Centauri began its artificially induced collapse, the Zarathi fleet found itself caught in gravitational forces that their shields could not protect against and their engines could not escape. Ships that had survived battles across millions of years were crushed like insects by forces that human engineers had learned to control through desperate necessity and absolute determination. Warlord Zethmak's final transmission broadcast on, All frequencies as his ship was torn apart by the engineered supernova contained a single word that the translation computers rendered as impossible. But for humans who had grown up fighting for survival in the ruins of bombed cities, making the impossible happen was just another day at the office. Chancellor Min-seok Yang stood before the reformed Galactic Council, now meeting in emergency session to address the aftermath of what historians would call the Andromeda Incident. Representatives from every known civilization watched as he delivered the statement that would define humanity's role in galactic affairs for generations to come. Today, we faced an enemy that possessed technology we could not match and numbers we could not overcome, he began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. They had every advantage except one. They did not understand what it means to fight humans who are defending their home. The chamber was silent. Every being present had seen the recordings of the battle, had witnessed human forces literally move stars to achieve victory. The implications were staggering. There is a lesson in what happened at Andromeda Gateway, Min-seok continued. It is the same lesson that every civilization has learned since humanity first entered galactic affairs. There is only one rule in this galaxy. Don't interfere with Earth's fleet. Don't threaten human colonies. Don't attack human allies. Don't test human resolve. He paused, letting the words sink in. Every civilization that has broken this rule has learned the cost. Some learned through defeat, others through subjugation. The Zarathi remnant learned through extinction. The choice, as always, remains yours. The silence that followed was profound. In the space of 8 years, humanity had gone from a contained primitive species to the unquestioned masters of galactic civilization. They had defeated every challenge, overcome every obstacle, and eliminated every threat through a combination of tactical brilliance, technological innovation, and absolute refusal to accept defeat. Questions? Min-seok asked. There were none. After Andromeda Gateway, there were no more questions about humanity's place in the galaxy. There was only the new reality. A universe where the species from the third planet of an unremarkable star had become the final arbiters of life and death for every civilization that shared their galaxy. As the session ended and representatives filed out of the chamber, one truth was evident to all. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy through superior technology or overwhelming numbers. They had conquered it by being the only species willing to pay any price, make any sacrifice, and cross any line to protect their own. The galaxy had learned to fear not human weapons, but human resolve, and in that fear, they had found a peace more lasting than any in galactic history.